migration to economists. Can the new CLP government do anything to turn the population figures around? One new member of the Country Liberals parliamentary team is Tanzil Rahman, who researched population and immigration policy at Oxford University and has worked on this inside and outside government. He left election night celebrations at the Italian club in Marara to get on a flight to present at the Developing North Australian Conference in Karratha last week. Tanzil Rahman, the new CLP member for Fong Lim, welcome back to 1057 ABC Radio Darwin.
Good morning, Rick. Thank you for having me again.
Tanzil Rahman, people covering the election campaign day to day described it as boring and uneventful compared to previous hectic campaigns of the past, and yet election night threw up spectacular swings and unexpected results aplenty. Did you get a sense that was coming? Door knocking in Stuart Park, Coonawarra, Hidden Valley, Winnellie and Woolner.
I guess in a nutshell, yes. I think the result, whilst surprising to some, was not shocking to those of us that were on the ground and talking to people and sensing just how frustrated they were with 8 years of a Labor government that hadn't produced much tangibly. What was clear was that we had tapped into the right issues, speaking to people in relation to reducing crime, rebuilding our economy and restoring territory lifestyle. And those messages resonated with the public, and those were the things that we were being fed back on the doorstep. I think in terms of the spectacular result, it's a function of probably two things. The first is the incredible amount of hard work that a lot of our candidates put in on the ground. And so, especially in the northern suburbs, people like Jinson Charles and Ollie Carlson and Kota Patel really worked so hard to win those seats, and I salute them for the effort they put in. But it's also important to acknowledge that the result is a function not just of our hard work and our policies, but also people turning against Labor because they were so dissatisfied with the state of affairs, and everybody wanted change. And so change is what we've got. Some people might be surprised by the scale of change, but we certainly aren't taking it for granted, and we'll be doing everything we can to deliver for Territorians.
You know what struck me? A CLP election ad, a bloke in a singlet with neck tats, saying he'd voted Labor all his life and he wasn't going to this time. And it looks like a lot of people in Wanguri, in Casuarina and Karama, but also in Johnston, made that decision. What does the CLP need to do to keep them?
Well, we're not just trying to appeal to blokes with neck tats. We're trying to appeal to everyone. And the fact is, for 20-odd years, 2 out of 3 people have been voting Labor in this town. And a lot of those people needed to change their mind in order for us to win the majority that we've won. And I can tell you day in, day out, the conversations I had in Stuart Park, Woolner and Bayview in particular, which are places where lots of public servants and traditionally Labor-leading people live, were exactly of that ilk. I've voted Labor all my life. I'm frustrated and I've had enough. I want to give the CLP a chance. We believe you have the right people with the right skills to be able to deliver for the Territory.
The CLP had a double landslide. They won a lot of seats, but they also picked up a lot of votes, and one doesn't necessarily mean the other in NT politics. There's been plenty of discussion already about how diverse the parliament will be and how many first-generation migrants have been elected. What do you think that says about the Territory and about its future?
Well, we've got Territorians who are born here. We've got first-generation migrants. I myself am a third-generation Territorian. We've got a spread of what represents the Territory. And I think the CLP from the outset, and I think Shane Stone in particular deserves some credit for this, identified that the CLP needed to identify candidates that reflected the diversity of the Territory, not in terms of being diversity hires, but in terms of representing the skill sets and the qualities that are required to be able to represent the whole of the polity, not just some pocket of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you left election night celebrations, I saw you there, to attend and present at the Developing North Australia Conference. Why did you do that?
It was actually set up some 6 months ago when I was still working as an academic and had a separate life. And so I asked the organisers if they still wanted me to come out, and they were very much interested in still hearing what I had to say. And so I was very privileged to be there. To be clear, I went out there to speak in my capacity as an academic, still attached to Oxford University, not as a member of the new government. But what I spoke about were essentially the same issues that I had been identifying and highlighting in the Northern Territory for a number of years and internationally prior to that, which is to say that the Northern Territory has a population decline and skilled workforce problem that it needs to address. And in essence, what I presented about was, in the relentless pursuit for financial capital over the last many years, we have dropped the ball on human capital. People. People are what underpin sustainable economic growth.
So To explain to people who don't know what human capital is, who haven't studied economics, what does that mean? How can we develop our human capital in Northern Australia?
Well, it's a broad umbrella term, and it means different things actually to different people. But what we're really talking about here, in short, is people rather than money, or rather than physical assets. Now, in the Northern Territory, we have three groups of people we really need to be thinking about. Territorians, of course, first and foremost, interstate migrants, and overseas migrants, because combined they add up to our population. And so what we need to do at the moment is think about not just how to, well, first of all, we need to diagnose where those populations are at. And we know in broad brushstrokes that we're not getting enough overseas migrants to grow our population. Interstate migrants are also hemorrhaging out, and Territorians need reinforcement because a lot of them have been choosing to leave in recent years as well. So in terms of developing our human capital, what we will be thinking about going forward is how to attract people, first of all, but then secondarily and more importantly, how to retain them, and then also how to develop those populations, because that is how you create sustainable population growth, which is, as I said, the underpinning of sustainable economic growth.
How do you get people who've come here from interstate to stay longer? That seems to be a real trap that the neither side of Parliament has been able to solve in the last 25, 30 years.
Well, with great respect to Parliament for however many years, I think they just haven't been looking at the international evidence on what needs to be done. There are all sorts of countries that are very successful at attracting people from all sorts of other places to come, stay, and make a contribution. So in broad brushstrokes, what we know the evidence base suggests to us is that for overseas migrants, the single most important thing when it comes to attracting them is permanency. People want security. And then after that, if you want to retain them, you have to settle them. And after that, if you want to develop them, you have to find ways to integrate them. Now, when we're talking about interstate migrants, it's a slightly different story. People are attracted by livability, and then people are retained on the basis of opportunity. And in order to develop them long term, you have to provide people from interstate upward mobility. You have to provide them a better option here so that they don't choose to go back to Sydney or Melbourne.
How do you make the top end more livable when it's hot and humid and down south's not?
Singapore's hot and humid as well, mate. So it's not just about climate, it's about a range of factors. And the single most important ones are a future for your family, a reasonable job, and safety and security. You can look at all of the aggregated academic evidence, and 1,000,001 factors will contribute to people making decisions about choosing to move somewhere and stay somewhere. But the most important ones over and over again are providing a future for your family, economic safety and security.
If you don't develop your own, whether they're people who are born here or people who've moved here from overseas or interstate, do you risk relying on a FIFO workforce? That's one of the criticisms of previous gas-led booms. If we're in for another one, could we have a situation where people just build the plant and then go home?
Yeah, the point is that migration is not a substitute for investing in your local population and in the skills and talent and capability locally that is required. It is a supplement and a complement to that process. And every Productivity Commission report for the last 20 years will tell you that over and over and over again. So it's not about one or the other. It's about making sure that you're doing the right things to domestically upskill, train and support your local population. And that includes in the Northern Territory our Indigenous population very importantly as well. But in addition to that, there are certain jobs that people are unwilling to do or unable to do. And that's where you look for substitute labour. And that's what migration is all about.
How could we do that better? Isn't that the role of the federal government? Should there be a different migration policy for Northern Australia to the rest of the country?
Well, possibly, mate. You've hit the nail on the head, and that's why I was at the Developing North Australia conference. You see, the thing is, the challenges that we face in the Northern Territory are not unique. They are shared in some ways by North Queensland and North West Australia. I'll give you an example. The motel I was staying at for the conference had a sign on it saying, "We're really sorry, but we only service rooms once a week now because we don't have the staff to be able to clean anything anymore." So that's a concrete example, if you like. And there have been discussions for some time about a new compact on migration for the north of Australia, because all of north of Australia requires people to come and stay. And so it's not an impossible task, but we need to band together and work with others in order to generate a new compact on migration with the federal government. But I can certainly say from the discussions I had in my previous life working within government that the federal government is open to those conversations.
They've expressed that when they've come up from Canberra to talk to us, but that seems to be where it stops. They're open to those conversations. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of development so far.
Well, the conversations have to be driven by ministers, and the conversations have to be driven by a government with purpose and agenda, hope and optimism. And I think that's what the new CLP government is offering. So I hope in earnest that our new government will be engaging with the federal government constructively, along with other state and territory governments, to broker new arrangements when it comes to migration for the north of Australia, for the benefit of not just Northern Territory people, but for the benefit of the whole of Australia.
You're listening to 105.7 ABC Radio Darwin. Rick Hind with you. Tanzil Rahman is the newly elected CLP member for Fong Lim. Now, Tanzil Rahman, I promise not to grill you about portfolio allocations, but you're a first-term parliamentarian with very specific knowledge, skills and experience that other MLAs don't have. What are your hopes and aspirations?
Oh, mate, I think I told you last time I came on here, I'm a cricketer. I was just looking to make the squad, and I'm delighted to have made the squad. And I'll bat where I'm told to bat. And if I'm asked to carry the drinks, I'll happily do that for a while as well. Because if you've ever been part of a cricket team, you'll know that you learn an enormous amount while you're carrying the drinks, while you're giving your teammates throwdowns. So I will serve at the Chief Minister's discretion for the benefit of our team.
You didn't just campaign in August, you also did a couple of live music gigs. Is that set to continue with your new day job?
I certainly hope so. Look, all of us are human beings and have alter egos and other lives. I was delighted to be able to play a bunch of gigs throughout my electorate, and it was a lot of fun, and it was also a good way to get reintegrated into the community. There's amazing venues in Fong Lim, which is something I didn't know when I first started out. Dinah Beach Yacht Club, Frying Nemo, the 1 Mile Brewery, they've all got great live music options. And so I expect to be back there as soon as I possibly can be in between my day job.
Tanzil Rahman, the new member for Fong Lim from the CLP. Thanks for coming on and talking to us, and congratulations on your win.
Thank you very much.